Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian webinar. The STEP program is excited to have you back for another great session. We've got a wonderful panel lined up to talk about partnerships between MPOs, regional agencies, and DOTs, and how those partnerships can really help advance complete streets projects. You'll hear some common themes, I think, from these panelists that you've heard in some of our previous webinars about really centering focus on pedestrians and bicyclists and really how we can improve, really at the heart of the STEP program, how we can improve those crossings through kind of a complete streets approach. So we're excited to have our panel joining us today for this session. I want to take a moment and introduce them to you right now. We are joined first by Ricardo Gutierrez. He is the Mobility Program Manager at the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, Broward MPO. He established the Complete Streets Initiative at the Broward MPO back in 2013 to implement the Complete Streets concept in Broward. He has been with the Broward MPO since 2007 and has been focusing on multimodal transportation planning since 2013. So we're excited to welcome Ricardo. We're also joined by Brad Salisbury, who is an in-house design project manager at the Florida Department of Transportation, District 4, where he manages an 8-person team of roadway engineers and planners. He has been in FDOT roadway design for over 10 years and is the engineer of record on a variety of projects, including multiple complete streets projects. So welcome, Brad. And finally, we're joined by Stephanie Garcia. She is the Complete Streets Manager at the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization. She works on the Complete Streets Initiative and mobility projects. Stephanie is leading walking audits in Broward region as part of the public involvement efforts of the Complete Streets Master Plan, community engagement events, and the Tactical Urbanism Program for the Broward MPO. So we have an excellent panel. They've got a lot of really great lessons and kind of success stories to share with you. So we want to have some time, really hear from them, and then have some discussion at the end of the presentation. Before we get there, I just have a few housekeeping items for you all. First, please do, as attendees, submit your questions during the presentation and your comments as well. You won't have the ability to speak during the webinar, but using the questions pod, you can communicate with us and we'll try to respond to those either in real time or save those questions for that discussion period at the end. We've saved about 25 or so minutes for Q&A with our panel. We are archiving this webinar at pedbikeinfo.org/webinars. From there, you can find the link to the page for this webinar. We'll be posting, we've already posted the presentation slides actually, and we'll be sending those out in the chat pod shortly to you, a copy of the presentation, so you can follow along today if you like. We will also post the video recording of this webinar there. In case you missed something, in case you want to share it with a colleague who wasn't able to attend, that'll all be available to you. We're also going to provide you with a way to generate a certificate of attendance for the webinar. That'll come in a follow-up email later today. And we're also having the webinar submitted to AICP for 1.5 CM credits. So if you're a planner and you typically claim those, you should be able to find this webinar right there in their event calendar. I also wanted to mention that we have a service available today to provide a live stream, live transcript for the webinar discussion. And so if you need that, we'll be sending that message out, the link to the chat pod in just a moment, so you can follow along with that live transcript. And by now, if you've attended any of our previous STEP webinars, you probably know about the Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian program from the US DOT Federal Highway Administration. Really a way to center some thinking around the importance of pedestrian crossings and really how we can improve them and enhance safety for pedestrians at uncontrolled locations. There are a set of spectacular 7-step countermeasures that the program is supporting, everything from road diets, pedestrian hybrid beacons, visibility enhancements at crosswalks, lighting. You'll find a lot of information about these important countermeasures in our previous webinars, as well as on STEP websites. And if you've checked the website lately, you may be familiar that there have been many new resources added. You will find the Step Up campaign information, which we covered in a previous webinar. Step Studio is providing a lot of really exciting tools and building off of the existing web resources that we've been providing, including videos, tech sheets about the countermeasures, case studies of how they've been applied in different communities, and a lot of other great information. If you see the bottom right link, that's how you can find the STEP resources. If you go to that link, we'll also push that one out you all momentarily as well, just so you have all of these at your fingertips. A lot of really good information there. I'd encourage you, if you do have more questions about STEP or want to learn how the program can kind of help support your activities, Becky Crow, who's on the webinar today, and Peter Unn, both with the Federal Highway Administration, will be happy to respond to those questions. You can reach out to them using the information here on the screen, their email addresses, and again, the STEP website is a great place to go as well. I don't have anything more to cover, so I want to go ahead and turn it over to our first panelist, Ricardo Gutierrez, to kick things off with our presentation. So Ricardo, I'm sending the screen to you now. I'll let you know when we see your screen. Perfect, you are all set, and please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Here. Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that great introduction. Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to present and be part of this webinar. We're excited to share some of the things that we're doing here in South Florida to make our streets safer for users. Definitely emphasizing those partnerships that need to take place along the way, including our very important partnership with FDOT. We'll go over some of our various efforts and that we're currently working on to improve pedestrian safety. And also we'll touch on how we're incorporating some of those spectacular 7 STEP strategies into some of our projects. We want to start the presentation with some context, some background on how we became one of the worst, the most dangerous places to walk and bike in the entire country, and how decisions that were made in the past created the transportation system that we have today, really the issues that we have with safety for pedestrians and cyclists, more importantly. And share with the participants some of the things that we're doing together in partnership with our local partners to remedy the situation. For those of you who don't know where we are, we're actually located in Southeast Florida. We are bounded by Miami-Dade County on the south side, Palm Beach County on the north side, the Everglades to the west, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. Our largest city and probably the city that most of you are familiar with is the city of Fort Lauderdale. Our board is actually, we have a board representation for all 31 municipalities, county commissioners, the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, and we also have representation for our Broward School Board. A quick look at Broward since 1980. This is really when a lot of things happened since then. We actually experienced some rapid population growth that occurred since, especially in Southwest Broward, which is closer to Miami-Dade County. New type of development occurred. We're starting to see some different development patterns happening here. A lot of cul-de-sacs, a lot of gated communities, not really conducive to walking and biking. Our population in 1980 was about a million, and now, as of 2019, we're also close to 2 million in population. So we actually probably double our population in the last 40 years. So to keep up with this population growth, the Broward MPO and its partners, the cities and the county, invested heavily in our transportation system. New roads were constructed to high capacity. Existing roads were widened from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, 4 lanes to 6 lanes, and in some cases, we actually widened our roads to 8 lanes. There's a few roads in our transportation network that are 8-lane divided roads. Not much consideration was given to other modes of transportation. In the late 1990s, our MPO actually gave us direction to look at alternative ways to add capacity without having to add additional lanes. One of the things, as moving vehicles was the priority back then, and us as smart planners that we were, or we thought we were, we expanded our intersections. So we added some free right turn, free flow right turn, dual rights, dual left, in creating an environment that's really not suitable or encourages people to walk and bike. It definitely was carrying a lot more cars. It was definitely more efficient for automobiles, very, very difficult for people to walk and bike. Actually, if you look at the picture on the left, I'm sorry, on the right, the Cypress Creek Road or Andrews Avenue for Lauderdale, our offices are located on the southwest corner, and the shops and the restaurants are actually in the northwest corner. Us, when we go to lunch, when we used to go to lunch, uh, we wouldn't use this intersection. We basically go west a little bit and cross and jaywalk to get to the north side because we only had to cross 8 lanes. Here we were crossing about 10 to 11 lanes. So even us as planners are, don't even use those facilities, and we shouldn't be expecting others to do so. But however, everything changed where the adoption of our 2035 long-range transportation plan. This plan was adopted by MPO board in December 2019, and it really changed the way we do our planning here in Broward. It created a paradigm shift, if you will. It focuses more on moving people, not necessarily vehicles. For the first time, it allocated a lot of funding for other modes of transportation, not necessarily capacity improvements. About 70% of the funding allocated in this plan was for modes other than the automobile. Complete shift from the past. Typically, capacity will carry about 6 to 7% of the funding, with the remaining to other modes of transportation. And for the first time ever, we did have a list of bicycle pedestrian improvements. One of the things that in the past, the only way we can actually implement bike lanes and sidewalks was through a capacity improvement. So this clearly changed the way we do our planning here in Broward. Quickly on, I guess we all understand complete streets, but even at that time it was a sort of an emerging concept. We heard it was coming out of LA County. Proven results. The data was showing that when you plan, design, and operate streets for all users, you get all these benefits. First and foremost, safety. You create healthy communities. You definitely improve the economic vitality of your area. So we found that the benefits actually were something that we wanted to promote. Kristen Jacobs, a former MPO board member, directed staff to look into this concept and really find ways to implement it here in Broward. So she became the champion of complete streets in Broward County. So now we have this concept that we want to promote. We have projects, a list of projects from our 2035 long-range transportation plan, and we have funding. So what do we do next? So this is the steps that we took to actually try to implement the complete streets concept here in Broward. So we developed an education and training program, which became a complete streets initiative. We developed a process in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation District 4 office called the Mobility Program to get projects from planning to implementation. And we established good partnerships with the local governments, the jurisdictional owners. We actually needed to get their buy-in so we can implement projects. The Broward MPO does not own real estate, does not own any roads. So definitely we need to make sure that the partners are on board with this concept so we can implement this type of improvements. A little bit about the Complete Streets Initiative. It's a very simple goal to provide the necessary tools to our local governments in implementing complete streets in their respective communities. Tell you a little bit more about this now. About training education, we hold regular trainings at least twice or 3 times a year. We're bringing national recognized experts on complete streets to provide training to our local partners and elected officials. We have technical resources online. We have an evaluation toolkit, a complete streets design guidelines, informational posters. We're also identifying a multimodal level sales tools that the communities can use. We have a model policy and planning framework. So all the resources are available on our website for free. We also established a complete streets advisory committee made up of representatives from a lot of municipalities, but also want to highlight, we also have non-traditional partners, people from the health industry, nonprofits, and advocacy groups as well. They're actually active participants as part of our Complete Streets Advisory Committee. We do hold yearly community engagement activities as well. We do our Let's Go Walking every October of the year and our Let's Go Biking on March. March is actually bike month here in South Florida. So the goal of these events are really to go ahead and get people to experience active transportation, get them out there in their bikes or walk to different corridors. The whole idea is you miss a lot when you're driving 55 miles per hour. You miss the shops, you miss the restaurants. When you work, you actually start noticing more things. We average about 100 participants per event, so that's very successful programs. One of the things that we wanted to have this year was the Broward Ciclovia. It was going to be the first one in Broward. However, given the conditions that we're in, we decided to postpone that event to further notice. Some of the trainings that we had in the past, NACTO has come in, FHWA and others. As part of our training program, in 2014, we established our first Safe Street Summit. Again, with the same idea to promote the concept of complete streets and educate technical staff and really get the support from the elected officials. Really, our first event only had 75 people, but since then it has become one of South Florida's premier conferences on complete streets. In 2017, we partnered with the Miami-Dade TPO and the Palm Beach TPA, our neighbor MPOs, to make this a regional conference. Since then, we have been averaging about 500 participants per year. So it's been a very successful program for us. Some of the speakers that we had, just to give you an idea, we have former US DOT Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, Michael Colville Anderson from Copenhagen, Charles Montgomery with Happy City out of Canada, and Charles Morone from Strong Towns, just to name a few. And by the way, Rebecca Crow, who leads the STEP program at the federal level, actually presented at the 2016 Safe Street Summit. I hope she remembers that. Some of the key partnerships, again, partnerships with the local jurisdictions are very important. We're also partnered with different agencies. ARP is a staple in every event that we host. FDOT, Software Community Services. But I want to highlight our partnership with the Broward Regional Health Planning Council. We partnered with them originally to develop the original Complete Streets Guidelines developed back in 2012. It's actually through a grant that they received that they actually secured that we're able to actually put that document together. So and we've been partners ever since. Mobility program, this is the program that we've established to get projects from planning to implementation with FDOT. This is the process that we have. Just want to quickly highlight a couple of items here that we actually have some of the requirements that we established to ensure projects are implemented successfully. The program ready requirements. These are requirements that need to be met before a project becomes eligible for funding. So go over those requirements real quick. The program scope of work, we need to have a good scope of work that has the buy-in of participants, the locals, the cities, the county, or whoever is the owner of the facility. As part of the scope of work, we also require right-of-way verification. Our federal funds can only be spent on right-of-way that's public property. It cannot be spent on private property. So one of the things that we learned later is that we need to have the comfort level that wherever we're spending our funding is actually public right-of-way. Partner collaboration. Through our process, we found out that a lot of the local governments were moving forward with some plans without consulting with the owner of the facility. For us, it's a key to have the buy-in of the owner of the facility, so the partner collaboration is very important. We also need to develop good cost estimates. This is how we secure funding. We need to know exactly how much money we're going to need. And the last thing is the documentation of support. Definitely, we need a resolution from the county, the city, or the local government commission. Through our process, we found out that even though we were working with the technical staff at different cities, sometimes that communication did not go to the commission. So a lot of times the commission were not aware of this prior. So now we're actually requiring a resolution from the county commission, county or city commissions, showing the support for projects. And the most important thing, we expect the local governments to actually do some good public outreach. We want to make sure that the communities are aware of these projects that are coming up and are supportive of the projects. Once all those program ready requirements are met, the project is deemed eligible for funding. One of the other things that we've established through our process is the 30-year check. As our funding comes in 5 years, let's say if today we identify a project in one of our plans, the earliest it can be actually programmed for funding is in 2026. So a lot of things can happen in 5 years or 5 or 6 years. So we established a 30-year check with the local governments where we check what the status of the intent of the project is. Excuse me. So one of the things that they we understand that at the local level, commissions change, visions change. So there's a lot of things can happen in 5 years. So we meet with them in the 3rd year to make sure that the scope of the project is still good, and we can actually, during that time, we actually entertain some changes. And public outreach is probably required one more time, depending on the significant changes that we made to the scope. Again, when we enter design, we go to the public again to let them know we're designing. To just highlight the plans review system that the FDU has in place, where the local governments can actually review plans throughout the entire process. So that's very important. And lastly, before construction, we also hold a public information meeting. Again, you see the theme here, a lot of public involvement happening here. You know, we're very lucky here in Broward to be working with a very progressive, innovative FDOT. The District 4 office has been one of our most important partners since we established the initiative. They have embraced the concept of complete streets. They have updated internal documents, developed new documents and processes, all in an effort to make the street safe for all users. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad Salisbury, who will provide a little more information about FDOT's efforts, including the land elimination process that was established here and piloted here at the District 4 office. And he'll also highlight some of the projects that include those spectacular 7 strategies. Brad, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ricardo. Yes, as Ricardo mentioned, I'm Brad Salisbury with the Florida Department of Transportation District 4 Design Office. We are located in Fort Lauderdale. As Ricardo mentioned, I wanted to highlight the mobility program, sort of those steps after the MPO takes to make sure the projects are program ready, and just highlight how this mobility program is really advancing complete streets in addition to the spectacular 7-step countermeasures that I'll highlight. Ricardo mentioned lane elimination. I'll touch on that a little more in depth. So before I got into the mobility program, sort of concurrently while the MPO was thinking about complete streets and really rethinking how these roads in Broward are working, FDOT as a whole was developing what we call context classification. And this was just taking a step back from the strict urban-rural separation that had been used in the past, and break down those roads a little more in depth into categories. Everything from C1, which is the natural park area, all the way to the C6 urban core. So when you're looking at what makes sense in the urban core, that may not be a complete street for the C1 natural area. So really tailoring the complete street concept to better suit that area that we're serving, and everything in between, from your rural town to more suburban areas, and as you get more and more dense to your urban core. So this context classification determines a number of roadway design criteria, everything from lane width to your design speed to your sidewalk width. But our Florida Design Manual breaks down all those criteria into the categories for the C1 to C6. And as part of this context classification effort, DOT conducted a statewide effort to assign a context class to each road. This was more of a 10,000-foot view of maybe looking above on an aerial of, okay, this area is definitely a C1, a natural area. Okay, this is urban core, and what we call the statewide provisional context class. And as a project comes through and we have the chance to further refine that, we have a process that I'll outline below. It's utilizing the multimodal scoping checklist. So after the statewide provisional context class is set, the multimodal scoping checklist is created by FDOT, where we'll really look at more of the street view level analysis for the road. So getting down there and really seeing, okay, what is this, a suburban area? Is this more of the rural town? But less of the 10,000-foot view and more of the street view. And we'll assign its context class at that point for the project. Now we provide the local governments this provision or this context class and give them the chance to give us feedback. And sometimes a discussion will happen, and the city or county may have different plans in the future for this roadway, and a final context class is sort of set for consideration into the project scope. So this is important because it sets those criteria early before the design project begins of, okay, what are our WITs going to be in developing the project further down the road? So now I'll take a step forward back to the mobility program and kind of highlight what we're doing for the safe transportation for every pedestrian countermeasures. In this mobility program, these are often included by request of the local agency or through a FDOT safety study or a safety review for an FDOT project where these countermeasures are identified for incorporation into the projects. Or sometimes it could be just a local agency making a one-off request and DOT conducts a separate study to incorporate them. The countermeasures, as Dan highlighted before, the raised crosswalks, crosswalk visibility enhancements, pedestrian refuge islands, pedestrian hybrid beacons or HAWKs, the leading pedestrian interval, rectangular rapid flashing beacon or RRFB, and road diet. I'll touch on that last one in a little more in depth, but I'll briefly run through the first 6. So as I mentioned, incorporating these step features into the mobility program and Complete Streets projects is really a partnership between us, the MPO, and local agencies. I've highlighted the raised crosswalks was one key feature implemented on this was a non-state road, Old Dixie Highway in the city of Fort Lauderdale. That was a partnership with MPO and the city of Fort Lauderdale to really make that a more walkable, complete street for the community, incorporated several raised crosswalks into that. The high visibility crosswalks, this is something we are by default installing special emphasis crosswalks with the longitudinal and perpendicular markings at every signalized intersection. But this is one I wanted to highlight. There was a collaboration with the city of Deerfield Beach to also install the pattern pavement into those. So still maintaining the decorative features the city requested, but including the key safety features of the high visibility crosswalk. This pedestrian refuge island on the right was with the city of Fort Lauderdale on Sunrise Boulevard. This was a traffic operations DOT office worked on this project, and it incorporated the high visibility crosswalks, but also a key pedestrian refuge in the median. And it was identified as a need by the city of Fort Lauderdale and implemented by the traffic operations office. Pedestrian hybrid beacon or the HAWK, we do not have any installations of those in Broward County, but we do have those at other places in District 4. We cover 5 counties in South Florida, and so the 5 installations we had in our district are all in St. Lucie County along A1A. The step countermeasure is really a leading pedestrian interval, but I wanted to highlight we have several locations in the district with a leading pedestrian interval, but I just wanted to highlight the exclusive pedestrian phase we do have active at some extremely high volume pedestrian areas like this beachfront A1A in Fort Lauderdale. That gives an all red phase where all pedestrians are crossing. And there's to go a different section of A1A in Lauderdale by the Sea, we have the RFB installation. This was by request of Lauderdale by the Sea, heavy beach access route that was being utilized and really needed some additional assistance for the pedestrians to cross. So that was done as a project by the FDOT for Lauderdale by the Sea. And the last and what I'll dig into the most was what we're calling lane repurposing. Has a few different names: lane elimination, road diet, lane repurposing. DOT currently calls it lane elimination, so I'll refer to it as that. But we are working on, at a DOT's statewide level, a repurposing guidebook that I'll highlight on the right. This process is currently outlined in the Florida Design Manual to guide applicants through. The upcoming lane repurposing guidebook is still going to follow the same process generally. It just gives a little more background information. So as I mentioned before, the process kind of like similar to Ricardo's the mobility program readiness. This process requires local agency initiation, public outreach, and a commission resolution. So typically DOT is not scoping projects ourselves for lane eliminations, but we do receive a number of local agency requests for it. So this guidebook that we're developing is going to help provide local agencies with the best practices, example projects, implementation steps to better facilitate working with them through this process. It can be lengthy, it requires data collection. It's definitely the decision to reduce a lane on the state road is needs a lot of backup to make that decision. So we realized that we first needed to formalize the process in FDM, but really we need to kind of provide a better, easier guidance for the locals going through this step. So just to highlight the number of lane elimination projects we have in our district, we actually have 29 state road projects in various degrees of completion. 5 have fully been constructed complete, and the other 24, it's a mix of, they've been identified as potential lane eliminations or approved. Inactive, meaning the locals have, they had once looked into it, but how, withdrew that application. Or active, they're currently being, they're going through the lane elimination process. So these are the 29 state road projects. I'll highlight the 29 non-state road projects on another slide, just to give a better view of how this whole region is really active with almost 60 projects of lane eliminations in one stage or another. And as we've had time to assess those 5 completed projects, we're conducting a before and after study. The DOT District 4 is. The phase 2 of the study is going to dig a little deeper into those completed projects to see tangible cost benefit type analysis. And the phase 1 really kind of got feedback from all our partners on how those are performing in the years after, but we really want to have hard data with how these are working out to help better manage the 50 odd projects that are coming through the pipeline. These are the 29 non-state road projects I alluded to. DOT, some of these, it has an active role where we're actually designing and constructing. Others, these are solely on the local agency that they're doing, but we did want to just capture every project in our region that's going through this. As you can see, the vast majority are in Broward County. So definitely the local agencies in Broward County have been more aggressive at pursuing lane eliminations. We do have a couple in Palm Beach County. So I wanted to highlight a few of the lane elimination projects in a little more detail. This was on a state road, Hillsborough Boulevard in Deerfield Beach. And this actually started as a FDOT resurfacing project. And through discussions with the local agencies, Deerfield Beach, namely, that this scope was, the lane elimination scope was added into the resurfacing project. We used shared funding since DOT was coming with resurfacing. It was could facilitate that cost for lane elimination a little bit, but we did have Deerfield Beach contribute some funding to the project. And the final project, the lane elimination, you'll see here on the right that we installed a bike lane and a landscaping strip with that eliminated lane. And that is completed. I was actually, during construction, the engineer of record on it, and we've definitely gotten some good feedback from our local agency partners on this one. And it's kind of being used as one of those example projects in the draft repurposing guidebook. Another one on a state road was an A1A in Fort Lauderdale. This was actually started as part of a Hurricane Sandy repair project. A large section of A1A was washed out, and first emergency repairs were done. But as we met with Fort Lauderdale and kind of focused on how we should remake this road, we sort of took that opportunity to re-envision it for what the city saw. And so part of that was incorporating a lane elimination. You'll see this was one of the, I'm unsure if it was actually the first, but it's one of the first lane eliminations that was done, and also included shared funding. And with that eliminated lane, we had a bike lane, median, and many decorative improvements funded by the city of Fort Lauderdale. Just to highlight a couple of the non-state road lane eliminations, we have Northeast 13th Street. This was solely designed and constructed by the city of Fort Lauderdale. It was part of a larger network of lane eliminations that, including one that DOT had worked on, the Old Dixie Highway project. But this kind of that whole area and corridor, the city sort of revitalized with this project, added a bike lane and median, including landscape features. You can see on the right that green bike lane is continuous throughout. Another project on a non-state road, this one was actually designed and constructed by FDOT, working with Sunrise. The main addition was for a bike lane, when it went down to 2 lanes with a bike lane. And this is not a lane elimination project, but it was a sort of a example complete streets project that DOT partnered with Hollywood and the Broward MPO to undertake. It did not have complete streets, but did incorporate a number of the other step countermeasures, really highlighting the pedestrian use of the corridor and trying to, make it a more complete pedestrian street. Included, striping and drainage improvements, colored concrete sidewalks, buffered bike lanes, pedestrian lighting, a lot of accessible, parking with accessible spaces and landscaping. With the key feature was this enhanced pedestrian crosswalks with a median refuge and walkway down the center of the project. And that's been constructed. Some future landscaping is still pending, as you see in this picture, but it's been a great example for the rest of the county and our district for what a complete streets project could be. With that, I'll hand off back to Ricardo to discuss that project a little more in depth.
Thank you, Brad. Yeah, the Hollywood Boulevard project in the city of Hollywood was actually one of 2 complete streets demonstration projects that we actually selected. We wanted to show how context plays a big role when selecting the appropriate treatments. Although the concept is the same, the treatment may vary depending on what the context of your road is. The Hollywood Boulevard was our urban demonstration project. Believe it or not, that's as urban as it gets in South Florida and in some of our cities here in Broward County. The destinations are a little different. They're retail, office, restaurants, shops, and actually this one actually provides direct access to the city hall.
Ricardo, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. We don't actually see your screen yet. I wonder if you try, could you hit that, see if you have that show my screen button. Sorry.
I got it. I apologize. I didn't realize you guys sent it. Can you guys
there
see
you
my
go.
screen?
Got it. Yes,
so
thank you.
The same thing applies. Basically, this is an urban demonstration, completion demonstration project in the city of Hollywood. Like Brad said, this is not complete. It's not complete. It's still missing a lot of elements. Through our partnership with the city of Hollywood, they were responsible for the landscaping, some hardscaping, some furnishings that are coming up, hopefully at the end of this year. And of course, it's missing a very important element: the trees, the shade. It's very hot here in South Florida, so we need to make sure that that gets implemented soon. Okay, let me see what's going on. All right, and the other complete streets demonstration project, our suburban demonstration project, was for Sunset Strip in the city of Sunrise. It was actually one of our first lane elimination projects in the entire county. It was completed in 2018. Different types of destinations here, very residential, parks, community centers, and small shops. Right now, it's highly successful. It has what we heard from the city is being used quite often. Right now, we are actually have collected the data for both projects, the pre-project data, and this is how we're measuring success. These are the metrics that we're using. We're using crash data, speed studies, vehicular counts, and bicycle pedestrian counts. We're aiming to have the data after the project is completed sometime in the fall of this year, and we'll collect the data for Hollywood Boulevard when that project is fully completed. So that really provided just a brief overview of our mobility program in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation. We'll go over some of the results, some of the outcomes later on in the presentation. But today, we wanted just to quickly go over some of our planning efforts that have been recently completed: the Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Action Plan and the Complete Streets Master Plan. Both of these plans were recently completed and aim to improve the safety of all users, including the pedestrian. So let's get to it. The Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Action Plan was completed in 2019. We'll start with a definition of what it is. It identifies strategic institutional changes needed to achieve the vision on how those changes can be accomplished. So it's a little different than a master plan and definitely different than a core study. This action plan is one step in the process towards improving the safety of all users. Actually, the action plan provides a baseline for future development of plans and programs. It also, as a result, identifies calls for action that focus on areas where institutional changes should be explored. The data-driven approach. For this analysis, we selected purposely statistically significant patterns, areas where the same type of crash risk was occurring, so the countermeasures that we were actually developing, proposing can be applied on similar corridors or intersections in other places in Broward. And then one of the things we find out that crash has correlated with high transit ridership areas, nothing new here, areas with the highest land use intensity and mix, and the highest propensity for walking and bicycling and riding transit. We selected, the areas we selected an urban corridor, an urban intersection, a suburban corridor, a suburban intersection, and also a beach access corridor. You see that on the southeast corner of the map. One of the things that we found, roads are wide and don't match the land use context. I think from what you saw in the initial slides, you see how our roads are pretty wide. Wide roads pose significant barriers for pedestrian safety to cross roadway. That's absolutely true. We have a lot of high-speed roads. That's amazing. We do have a lot of roads that have 40+ miles per hour posted speeds. And also there's an incomplete network. We did establish what we call an advocacy team who actually guided the development of the plan. Their responsibility included field reviews, countermeasure identifications, and alluded to champion some of these improvements. It consisted of representatives from different agencies in Broward. We developed project fact sheets for each area selected. We conducted field reviews during the morning and also in the evening to identify pedestrian and bicycle safety related issues for each site. We worked with a lot of partners, including municipality representatives, elected officials, school board members. Some of our residents came out and walked with us as well. ARP, Broward County Transit, the Florida Department of Transportation, and law enforcement officers as well. Some of the countermeasures that were actually recommended, common theme in many of these sites include improved lighting, adding the separations from vehicular traffic, maintenance issues, transit amenities that needed more shelters, and also that we need to include more mid-walk crossings. Some of the findings, definitely there's an identity crisis between the roads designs and user needs. Absolutely, that's also absolutely true. The roads are not primarily designed to provide a comfortable and convenient walking or bicycle experience. Absolutely, that's the case. It's more about how do we move vehicles efficiently and quickly. And many users of the systems are not following walking, bicycle, and driving laws. Not many people are aware of the actual laws that are in place. Strategic partnerships are needed to see the change. So we definitely, this is the outcome of the plan. It calls for some priority action items. Definitely identify areas where bicycle pedestrians are the priority movement. Implement a quick build program. That's something that we'll talk about in a minute. Align standards with bicycle pedestrian safety goals of the region. Institute district-wide bicycle pedestrian safety program. And also create an education program with law enforcement that focuses on bicycle pedestrian laws. So, This is the implementation part of the BIPSAP. So these are the calls to action established by the BIPSAP. So first, it set the stage. Identify areas in the county where bicycles and pedestrians are the priority movement. We're actually taking care of that with our complete streets master plan, which we'll show in a minute. Create safer streets. Implement the Quick Blue program. Actually, we're in the process of actually establishing our first technical urbanism program here in Broward County. We're hoping to have that stand up by the end of this year. We also recently updated our complete streets design guidelines to include recent standards and innovative designs. Prevent aggressive behavior. We are going to be putting together a Vision Zero action plan sometime next year. And we're also going to continue working with our partners at FDOT through many other educational campaigns, including Alert Today and Alive Tomorrow. All hands on deck. We held last year our Let's Go Walking event. We had our first Let's Go Walking to School event last year, where we engaged with students and parents to walk to school while learning about roadway safety. We painted some intersections, as you see there, some crosswalks, and provided educational signage throughout all the routes so people can start getting education on safety. We did have over 200 participants, city staff, teachers, the school was participating, and also the police department. I was asked to say this, it's not me, but we did receive some of the Transplex Award this year for both our Complete Streets Master Plan and the Complete Streets Design Guidelines. Okay, the Complete Streets Master Plan, this is a direct result of one of the priority items from the BIPSAP, adopted in February 2019. We do have a more robust presentation, but we just wanted to make, for the second time, we wanted to make a couple of slides to show what exactly we did. We definitely started with existing gaps. Where are the gaps in our transportation network? But the different thing is we also included what we no longer consider facilities, like 3-foot shoulders, wide outside lanes, or 4-foot bike lanes. We've seen that those facilities are not being used, so we consider those also as gaps. We did a demand analysis. We looked at areas with higher number of destinations, employment, retail, shops, parks, trails, schools, and higher population density, and also transit. We overlaid that analysis with our equity analysis. The equity analysis considers demographic factors which, when combined, indicate where there are concentrations of historically vulnerable populations. The indicators that we used were income, educational attainment, age, English proficiency, race, and also households with 0 cars. When we overlaid the two analysis, this is what we came up with, actually what we call that bundle areas, where we create a tight network of facilities with higher number of destinations while prioritizing our investments in areas that have higher number of vulnerable populations. The whole idea behind this bundle concept is really, sometimes we forget that we do more than just go to work. Only 20% of the total daily trips are work trips. You know, sometimes we forget that we go shopping, we go to the gym, we go eat out at restaurants, we go to our parks. And you know, and for some of us who have families, you know that we have to take our kids to soccer practice, baseball practice. So it's almost like a second job. So the whole idea is provide access to different destinations, and to everyday destinations to people, so they can consider those different modes. Right. As part of the Complete Streets Master Plan, we did have one of the most successful campaigns that we ever had at the Broward MPO. We interacted with over 1,300 resident stakeholders. Not typical in the planning world. This is, you know, transportation is not sexy to some people. So they don't really participate when you're planning. They'll really come out when you're actually ready to design and construct. So we utilize different methods of public outreach, but the most successful strategy was to leverage an existing relationship with the Broward Regional Health Planning Council had with local communities through their Healthy Community Zone program. These are low-income areas that are historically being neglected. So we actually went to them. We got some good feedback from those community zones, and really, actually, we we're able to incorporate some of the things that they were saying into our actual recommendations. Some of the things that we found is pedestrian lighting, traffic calming measures, and of course, people who need shade. So overarching themes in general from the public outreach, people want connected networks, which we're actually addressing through our bundle areas on our complete streets master plan. They want access to everyday destination, which we're addressing through our demand analysis. And definitely, one of the things that they were actually saying, they want those separations. They don't want to be right next to vehicular traffic. It's kind of dangerous, especially on higher speed roads. So not only are we proposing some of those type of improvements, but also immediately after we adopted the plan, we actually completed our Complete Streets Guidelines 2.0. The Complete Streets Guidelines 2.0 include new design standards, innovative designs, and also include some of our partners' efforts, including FDOT and Broward County. So one of the most exciting programs that we have at the Broward MPO is our walking order program. And really to get the community involved in the process, the whole intent is to get people to actually start walking with us before we start planning and scoping projects. So not only do we engage the public and stakeholders, but also our partners and engineering planners. We really need to start planning and engineering some of these projects from the user's perspective. So we need to walk and bike when we're actually designing these projects. So Stephanie Garcia, who leads this effort, is going to talk a little bit more about this program and provide a little more information on that. So I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie. Let me know when you're ready.
Thank you, Ricardo, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everyone to be here, for the interest of the Complete Streets Initiative and the partnership with the FDOT. So I will talk a little bit about the walking audits. As mentioned previously by Ricardo, part of the program ready process included public involvement. For this reason, in 2018 and 2019, the MPO conducted 6 walking audits in different areas of Broward region, as you see in the map on the right. High-ranking corridors identified in the Complete Streets Master Plan to engage community members, stakeholders, and government agencies early on in the process. Over 270 participants had the opportunity to examine these high-ranking corridors and provide feedback to improve the proposed scope. The 6 walking audits were conducted in different municipalities in Broward. As you can see in the map, the city of Lauderdale and Lauderdale Lakes in the central side of Broward, the Pembroke Pines, Hallandale Beach in the south side of Broward, Deerfield Beach, North Lauderdale, and Margate in the north side of Broward. These with the intent of covering diverse urban settings. An important part of the outreach process is collaborating with the city's public involvement team. As you know, who knows the cities more, the residents than the public involvement team, and who has the social media accounts in order to reach out to the different residents and communities. So we consider that this was an important part of the walking audits, to identify those departments in the cities who will help us in order to create this program and call the attention of the community. To engage residents, elected officials, technical staff, local businesses, the local YMCA, and engage traditional and non-traditional partners such as FDOT, the American Heart Association, and have the support of ARP volunteers, which, by the way, develop a great guideline in how to conduct walking audits. So just visit ARP website. For the MPO walking audits, we wanted to see it more as an opportunity for us to inform the community and partner agencies on Complete Streets principles, elements, and benefits, as well as getting their support. So this was an opportunity for the MPO to get to know the community and also to show what the MPO does. If we go to the next slide, Ricardo. Thank you. So to make this possible, the Broward MPO successfully funded the Walking Audits program through the Complete Streets Initiative. A question that comes to your mind could be how it works. The walking audits are coordinated with city staff and hosted in different locations, such as schools, parks, community centers, local businesses, depending on the urban context of the study area and the needs of the municipalities. So it is a flexible approach. As you can see on the photo of the top left, that's an skateway place. So yes, it is really interesting. Each working audit consists of a presentation about the Complete Streets initiative, as you can see in the first picture. This presentation has a project overview, land use context of the location, Complete Streets definition, pre-audit pictures of the corridor, meaning that the team explored the corridor days before to evaluate the area previous to the walking audit to identify the best route, issues, and possible hazards during the walk. The presentation also includes an outline of the activity, objectives of the audit, and safety tips for the participants. Then we go on a walk. Each group has a representative of each government agency and at least an AARP volunteer. This to make sure the groups are diverse and promote interaction between public entities and residents. It also includes a workshop. So if you see the photo on the left, yes, the bottom. That's after the walk. We go to the community center or the school, and we talk. We discuss the different findings, and we use aerial images as seen in the image to point all the issues that we found. And also, this part is really important. We have discussions between FDOT representatives and residents asking what is the best design in order to implement here in this area. So it was really interesting having to hear the discussions between residents and FDOT staff. So it was for us, that was like really important. Like we were really happy just for that. If we go to the next slide, Ricardo. Thank you. The walking audits help evaluate the working environment, identify pedestrian and bicyclist issues such as safety, access, connectivity, ADA needs, comfort, and convenience when walking. With the help of participants, we identified potential alternatives and solutions such as engineering treatments, policy changes, education, and enforcement measures. All this information is compiled in a report that is shared with the walking audit participants, city staff, transportation partners, and jurisdictional owners of the road. This is an important part of the process, as they will actually implement the improvement. As you can see in the photo, there is an example of one of the walking audits in the city of Lauderdale Lakes, where 3 schools are located: elementary, middle, and high school. There is a sidewalk gap and disconnection to the nearest bus stop, as you can see. This is a call of attention to act and plan for better streets. The Broward MPO uses guided feedback to inform the project scope, ensuring the needs of community members and stakeholders are clearly reflected in the final recommendations of the project. And the good news is that in 2020, when the MPO programmed for funding 4 out of 6 projects that belong to the first phase of the Complete Streets Master Plan, as you can see in the map. That included a walking audit. So all the projects that were programmed for funding, 4 out of 6 included a walking audit. This showing that it was a successful tool of public involvement, getting the feedback of the community into the scope of the project. And right now we have 4 projects in the TIP. But it doesn't end there. Walking audits also identify safety and maintenance issues that need to be addressed immediately. The process includes working with jurisdictional owners to address and correct the issues. One of them is FDOT. We provide a report with corridor-level safety improvements classified by tiers of implementation. And Brad will tell us a little more about this.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, and continue our partnership with MPO and our cities and counties from the Complete Streets and Mobility programs. We've had a really good working relationship on the walking audits. FDOT staff, as you see in some of those pictures, was was involved. We usually have representatives from multiple offices out there during the audits to provide that feedback. So when we look at implementation from some of the comments from the audits, we determine, okay, is this a state road or a local road? And the first action would be, best case, we have a upcoming or current project that we could add those improvements into. Next, as Stephanie had alluded to, we have separate improvement categories where short term maybe is something as simple as what's shown to the right, a sign installation. Typically signing and pavement marking type installations would be the short term, where we have rapidly deployed contracts through that could be push button type contracts to get out there and do that work immediately. Or maybe some intermediate term comments and improvements from the walking audit that might require a follow-up study or potentially a future project. Additional crosswalks, a mid-block crosswalk could be an example of this, where not as huge to require a project, but that's going to need additional study for how pedestrian usage of the area. And finally, we have long-term type comments that these would be considered a substantial improvement. Perhaps right-of-way acquisition or widening the roadway for bike lanes would be considered these. These long-term enhancements, we work with MPO and the local agencies for potential scoping a future project if deemed warranted, and it just helps get the highlight to the local agencies and the MPO and FDOT of at the street view level, here's what people are saying are needed. And I'll kick it off to Ricardo next to talk about what's coming up in the pipeline.
Thank you, Brad. Definitely, FDOT has been a great partner, even taking some of the recommendations regarding maintenance and operational issues that we identified through our walking audit. It's been amazing. So thank you for doing that. So what's in the pipeline? What's coming up? What's the result of our current efforts? And what do we have coming next? Okay, here we go. So a mobility program. This is as of December 2019. This is through a partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation. We wanted to show you that we have projects in all phases of implementation. These projects were identified in many of our plans, studies, or other efforts, totaling approximately about $300 million and adding about 195 facility miles to our network. This doesn't include the 77 miles that we're actually getting program ready for our Complete Streets Master Plan projects. So in addition to our mobility program, we have other funding mechanisms in place at the Broward MPO, and also have been able to secure other type of funding to allow us to actually secure more funding to implement this type of improvements. The mobility program is certainly not the only way to get projects funded at the Broward MPO. So through our Complete Streets and Localized Initiatives program, this is another funding mechanism we have in place at Broward MPO. It's a competitive grant program where we do call for projects every year where local municipalities can apply for funding. These projects typically are more lower scale projects with a maximum project cost of $3 million. This project was established in 2016. What you see here is only the projects that are on our what we call our regional network, collectors and above. Through that program, we're going to be adding 20 miles of facilities to our network. In 2016, also the Broward MPO partnered with 4 municipalities in Broward County government to apply and successfully receive Tiger Grant for projects. Through that grant, we're also adding 9 miles of facilities to our network. Construction on this project actually is starting today. I mean, it's in summer. It's slated to start. So we're going to be adding an additional 9 miles of facilities here as well. Our mobility program, this is what you saw in the previous slides, we'll be adding 195 miles of facilities to our active transportation network. So total, we have approximately 224 miles of facilities that have been programmed in our transportation improvement program. That means funding has been assigned. So really, in the next 5 years, we're going to have an additional 225 miles of facilities implemented on our transportation network. And last, and certainly not least, is our phases 1 and 2 of our Complete Streets Master Plan. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, the first phases, 4 projects of the phases have already been included in our TIP. What this map does not show is some of our local partners' efforts. Some of our partners already moved forward with implementing some of these improvements with their own funding, with local funds. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get that information on time to put it, to include in this as part of this presentation, but definitely there's a lot more going on than what you see here. So once everything is implemented, we're going to have approximately 300 facility miles added to our active transportation network. Some of the lessons learned, I think this is very important. Definitely establish champions at all levels, at the community level, technical, believe it or not, technical. We want engineers to be proactive and progressive, and more importantly, at the political level, especially if you're doing lane eliminations. Lane eliminations are key. So you need to have somebody at the commission who can speak and champion a project. We had issues when we did everything that was requested. We had elimination analysis completed and approved by technical staff within the public outreach, and projects can actually be killed at commission. So getting that public, that champion at that commission level is very important. Through our process, definitely public outreach. We need to do public outreach early and often. Again, the political support, we need to have that political voice, the political champion to champion some projects. Interagency coordination, one of the things that, again, I think I talked about this a little earlier, that we're finding that a lot of the local governments were actually moving forward with plans without consulting with the owners of the facility. We want to be able to fix that. And also interagency coordination, because as planners, we typically deal with planners. So we're moving forward with projects, and our counterparts at the cities, we're not really communicating with the engineers, with public works. So that's something that we definitely are aiming to correct. Definitely establishing roles and responsibilities pretty early on, so we know exactly what is our role in the entire process. Of course, we talked about that 3-year check to ensure the successful implementation of projects. And with messaging, definitely one of the things when we actually make presentations, and we want to talk about people and how we want to move people in the modular choice to different destinations, not necessarily to go to work. We found out earlier on that as soon as we mentioned the word cyclist or bicyclist, people had just a negative attitude towards that. But it's really about moving people. So that's the way we're messaging our improvements. And again, the last one, this is not an overnight solution. This is not going to happen tomorrow, especially here in South Florida, where everybody loves to drive. So it's going to take time. But we're making some good strides towards making that change. We want to thank you again for inviting us to present. And I guess Brad, Stephanie, and I are here to answer any questions that the audience may have.
Hey, well, thank you all so much. Those were excellent presentations, a lot of good lessons for everyone in the crowd. I am going to take the screen now and hopefully get my slide up to show panelist contact information. So we're going to get through as many questions as we can. You may want to reach out to our panelists. So using the information on this slide, I hope you can do that. We'll include this with the slide package online too, if you want to re-access these emails. Continue to send in those questions, but I'm going to start with what we have that's come in so far. I wanted to ask generally, I think Brad, you were kind of doing a great job reviewing some of the long list of countermeasures you all are using, from lane reductions to crossing countermeasures and these things. And there's a lot in your toolbox. Some folks in the audience are wondering about any countermeasures that you really haven't used a lot yet, but you see opportunities to. Maybe these are more innovative countermeasures. They may not even be among the step countermeasures. So some things that you've heard of that you might consider using, but haven't done that up to date, and maybe some reasons why you've what might be holding you back from using some of those things. I hope that's not too complex a question to ask you, but I want to see if you had any reaction to that.
Yeah, sure. some ones I'm thinking about, we internally illuminated reflective pavement markers, that actually would be solar powered. There's been a couple pilot projects that have installed those, but I think with any of the innovative or new countermeasures, it's really getting that initial approval and acceptance from FDOT, FHWA, getting those through into the pipeline where the projects in the safety office has the potential to use those. We have conditions where maybe what we'll call a developmental design standard that projects have the opportunity to use. And a big focus for DOT lately has been intersection lighting. Not particularly innovative, but it's just one of those, I guess, similar to high visibility crosswalks, making lighting and intersections priorities for projects and bringing those up to higher levels of lighting for crossing pedestrians.
Great. No, those are excellent examples. I appreciate that. I had a follow-up question about one of the other countermeasures you mentioned that sounds like you are using quite a bit, is the lane reduction, the road diet, whatever the proper terminology you are using. Those can be challenging. We've covered those in a previous webinar. They can be challenging to implement, and I wanted to relay a couple of questions, sort of asking you about what factors tend to be the biggest obstacles for implementation of a lane diet from your experience. Is it sort of the traffic volume that you're getting on the corridor? Is it a traffic signal issue about managing the turning movements? I've just wanted to know if there's one particular reason why, if a road diet doesn't happen, why does it usually not happen?
In my experience, that the most critical aspect to these is getting the early public support and buy-in for the projects. And part of that difficulty is, when that concept is created to do a lane elimination project, you may be looking at 5+ years down the road until that's constructed. So you have maybe changing public support or changing city opinions on what's best for that road in the meantime. So it's not only getting the early public support, but maintaining that public support throughout the planning, design, and construction process. With as long as that the traffic, the traffic number, the backup there is sufficient to make it work.
Okay, great. And Ricardo, Stephanie, any comments on those? I forgot to relay those questions over to you all. Any additional feedback you'd provide on some of those questions?
No, generally agree with what Brad had said. Definitely, maintaining that continuous support, from the time it's actually programmed into actually constructed, it's key. One of the things that I really like about the FDOT lane elimination process, that it's not necessarily just volumes. They also like to see public support, and they want to see that the community is actually in favor of this project. The issues that we're having with our projects is really sometimes education. I know we have a project that in paper looks really great. Community has supported the project. The traffic analysis has shown that this will not be impacted at all. Basically, we have a 40,000 car a day capacity. It's projected to go to 25 in 2045. So this is one of those no-brainers. However, when we present to the commission, again, we don't have that champion on board, and that's something that very emphasized. You need to have that champion who can speak and champion a project, where the commission really just turned it down and said, there's no way I'm going to give up a lane. And one of the things that we've seen a lot is they feel like we're taking something from them, right? They don't really see what they're getting. So we have an issue with that. So definitely a political champion, a commissioner, or somebody who can speak on the project at that level is key to the success of implementing complete streets projects that include lane eliminations.
Well, and it sounds to me like, and you talked at great length about public engagement and strategies, and it sounds like another case where really good, well thought out public engagement at the earliest stage is really critical for the success of some of these projects. And I wanted to ask some additional questions that came in around the public engagement side of things. And generally now we're all in a very unique circumstance where the public engagement strategies we're using right now are not necessarily the in-person strategies. And I'm wondering if you would be able to share anything in recent months. Have you all changed strategies or had to use any new strategies given that we're not doing in-person meetings? And how are you continuing to engage with the public in this time?
Yeah, it just so happens I have a virtual public meeting tomorrow night. DOT, we're developed guidance for how to conduct this kind of public outreach in the current environment, and just kind of constantly tweaking it. But we are, utilizing similar platforms to this, GoToMeeting or Microsoft Teams, for conducting that outreach, and just giving the locals still the opportunity to have project input. For public hearings, that guidance is still coming. We've had to postpone any public hearings, but we expect to have hopefully some guidance on that in the near future.
From our end, actually, this kind of has worked out on our favor, because and especially in the Western communities, where the community doesn't really participate in the process. However, because they can do this from their comfort of their homes, we're getting a lot more people to attend those public meetings virtually. So we get a lot more feedback, a lot more attendance. So it's kind of working on our favor. We definitely prefer in-person meeting, because the one-on-ones are very important. But through either like to go to meetings or the platforms, we've been able to actually get a lot of feedback from actual community members for some of our projects.
I would like to say something also. We are using a new platform. Well, we use S3 Maps histories, and also we use a Spark page. So what we did is creating an online website with information of the project. So you can see the beginning of the project, all the details, who's working with, like stakeholders, the details of the Completed Street project, benefits, before and after rendering. And this is really beneficial because could be part of public outreach, and also it could be part of the groundbreaking event. So right now, as you can have a groundbreaking event, you can use this type of information in order to, inform the community about what is coming for their for the roadway, and what is coming for them, and how they will benefit from the project. So this is really good, and we are really excited. We share the link with the team, so I hope they share the link with everyone so you can access, take a look, and why not maybe do the same. Something that is also important is that there are so many platforms online that are available, some are free. So you can just take advantage of that and be creative.
Well, and Stephanie, it's a great link, and I shared it with the audience. I was going to ask you about whether you see opportunities to maybe think about how to do some of the audit work that you talked about. Is that possible to do that virtually? Maybe platforms like this can do that, but I wonder if you've tried to maybe kind of mimic that process, but maybe from a more virtual setting.
Yes, we do have public virtual meetings, and actually, as part of the Completed Streets Master Plan program ready process of phase 1 and phase 2, we are encouraging the municipalities to follow a guideline that we are actually creating right now. The guideline will have information about different methodologies to reach out the public, one way, 2 ways, in order to get their feedback and include that information into the scope of the projects. So right now, we just have to be creative in order to identify ways, and also we can just look for best practices, like they are everywhere. And that's a good thing, that you just Google how to do this, and you will find so many examples right now. And even if you go to NACTO, a COVID information center, you can also go there and look for best practices. So I think the methodologies are available. You just have to talk internally with your team and, go for it.
That's great. No, I think we're all looking for good ideas for how to do things like that now. So
yeah, Dan, your virtual walking audit. It's a good idea.
Sure.
We'll have to do that.
Ricardo, I had a question for you. I believe you shared a slide that kind of prompted this question. It was a map of one of your project locations that really began it looked like at an intersection where you knew there might have been a problem, but your study boundaries kind of extended up the corridor away from the intersection. And I think a lot of our experiences, the crash data might lead us to a certain intersection and we might do changes just at that intersection itself. But it looks like you're really thinking more broadly about, okay, upstream and downstream, do we need to make additional changes there too? So it's a more holistic view. I wonder how you go about defining the boundary areas of your safety projects when you drill down to a certain location.
Let me get here. Yes, thank you for that question. I think that was probably the slide regarding some of the things that we are doing as part of the BPSAP, the Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Action Plan.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the elements that we identify that are actually get incorporated into a larger project. One of the things that we do with FDOT, and they're actually big on, is illogical termini. So definitely we incorporate some of the findings that we identified in the BPSAP included as part of the larger project. So a lot of those recommendations that you saw there actually extend beyond that what you see there. What we wanted to show you, the area that we actually walked and actually did a field reviews.
Okay, that's great. A follow-up question for you, Ricardo, is or on a slightly different topic. You had mentioned, I believe it's the term you mentioned is bundle areas, where you were able to fold in measures of, say, car ownership, other kind of equity, it seemed like equity-focused measures into certain areas, and really help to prioritize projects. I was curious to know, and a few others are curious to know about how that may relate to any work that's being done on transit routes or transit stops as well. Is there a connection there between bundled areas and transit improvements? And then beyond that, if you could just remind the audience, I've forgotten myself what all those measures are that fall into those bundle areas. If you could remind us what some of those are.
Right, definitely. One of the equity indicators that we use with people with no vehicles, households with no cars. And we also, as we're selecting, as part of the selection process, we selected areas with higher number of riders as well. So that was done before we actually identified this project as part of that demand analysis. So definitely, one of the things that we do work very closely with the Broward County Transit to not only identify the improvements that need to be had, but a lot of times our recommendations actually request the relocation of some stops. We notice a lot of the stops are probably could be located somewhere a little better, somewhere place where it'll be more accessible and people can safely cross. But definitely, yeah, we do have those indicators. We do work with BCT very closely to identify those improvements that can be part of this project.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I had a question. I don't know if this is a question for Brad or for Ricardo or Stephanie. You mentioned a list of factors that kind of help you determine project locations. Obviously, the bundle areas, a slew of other factors and measures. So some questions about how you use, if you use at all, pedestrian volume data or crossing counts to prioritize or determine where to put certain countermeasures. If the counts of pedestrians walking or crossing the street in current conditions plays into that decision at all.
Yes, definitely. For several of those countermeasures, we require sort of a study to have backup for pedestrian volumes. I'm thinking about the pedestrian hybrid beacon, the Hawk, and for the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Both of those or the pedestrian volume in the area is a determining factor to install those.
Okay. And here's a question that I think, I'm sorry, did someone else want to jump in on that one?
I just want to jump in on that. One of the things that FDOT is doing, and I went to a presentation last year at the FDOT Expo, they're not only looking at existing counts, but they're looking at potential count. So they're looking at the land development patterns here that's taking place, what's happening there, what's happening across the street, and allowing the PMs to actually project crossings. So it's not only current crossings, but also the potential to create more crossings in the future with new development. So that's really a good thing that FDOT is actually allowing the PMs to use.
Great. No, that's a really important point. The I think this may take the remaining discussion period time, and it's a question that always comes up with complete streets, and it's about project cost. And specifically, I think there's a mindset or a perspective out there that by including complete streets elements, pedestrian bicycle elements in projects, we're going to really exceed our budgets, and we're going to spend a lot more money than we would otherwise. And I wanted to ask you all if that how the cost perspective has looked at your level, if you've seen that projects are much more expensive when you use a complete streets approach, or have you noticed that by including some of these elements, you may be not actually exceeding the cost that much for a typical project. So I think this is important for a lot of people who are nationwide now. We're kind of looking ahead at some maybe budget crunches and looking at future transportation project cost. And I wondered how you all would answer that question of how costs increase when you do complete streets.
Ricardo, you wanted to go for that first?
I was hoping you did first, but I'll take a stab at this. So, one of the things when we actually go and present these projects, when you talk to people and you say you're doing this bike lane for a mile and the cost is $1.5 million, they go, "You're crazy. You are nuts. How can you spend $1.5 million on a bike lane or a sidewalk? It's actually out of control." But a lot of people don't realize that if we were to do a capacity improvement in the same corridor, you're talking about adding lanes, the cost would be in the million, maybe tenfold or more. Our investment in $300,000 will actually add about 224 facility miles. So it really is not costing us that much. Where the last, as a comparison, the last project capacity improvement along Stereo 7, there was a mile and a half. That total cost for a mile and a half of capacity improvements that went from 4 to 6 lanes was almost $220 million. So that's how we actually talk about it. It is costly, but it's not as costly as adding capacity to our roads.
And part of that early scoping process that the Broward MPO does with the local agencies, sort of before DOT gets involved, they decide on, sort of that reasonable scope. What is the project going to accomplish? Is it going to actually move curb, which can be probably the most costly thing on some of these complete streets? Or, is there some different lane width configurations that can be used where, we would just need to restripe or fill in sidewalk gaps? So for DOT, getting that early scope solid is crucial, because kind of avoid any scope creep down the road, or make it clear, here's what the Broward MPO funding source is covering, and here's what local agencies may add in for decorative features, or decorative lighting, or patterned pavement in the crosswalks. Some of those add-ons that come in, but typically not with the original funding source.
Those are all really great points. Thank you. I think the cost question continues to be a challenge for many agencies, but I like Ricardo, especially the comparison of what a comparable auto-oriented or lane mile project would cost, and that comparison between the modes, it seems like a no-brainer. So I appreciate that perspective. I wanted to, the topic is on partnerships. So the very final question I wanted to ask you all is that, from my perspective and our audience's perspective, clearly you all have developed a really close working relationship to get projects on the ground. And I don't think that's necessarily the case everywhere. And I would ask for your recommendations for if an MPO or if a state DOT district maybe wanted to work more closely with its partner to get some of these things done. What are the really practical kind of day-to-day solutions you would recommend? I mean, is it just getting meetings on the calendar? What are the strategies people could be using to better partner, better coordinate?
I'll start, Brad. One of the things, when we started this whole program and we noticed that we have a project on the city of Fort Lauderdale, it's a county facility, we're providing the funding, and FDOT is building this project. So initially, let's meet. And that's what really wasn't happening before. Unfortunately, everybody was doing their own thing. So having that kickoff meeting from the beginning, establishing what exactly we're going to be doing, has helped us tremendously. One of the things after we're meeting initially with different partners, and also, of course, we're lucky. We're working with District 4, FDOT, who was there at the table all the time. But some of our local agencies were saying, "How did you get FDOT to sit down with you? How did you do? What did you exactly you said?" Yeah, and I said, "Well, I don't know exactly what I said, but I remember that I said, you guys want to be at this meeting because you're going to be designing this project." So definitely having those kickoff meetings early on, and so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and just in continuing that, not just having the MPO hand off the project and say DOT go finish it. That during design and construction, we partner with them, meet with them, talk about the scope. They're involved in the public outreach, and just keeping them involved throughout has really strengthened that working relationship and just allowed more projects to come out of this.
Great. No, I think that's really valuable because it seems simple enough to just talk ahead of time and early and often, but I think it's a lesson that everybody can take home from and learn from your example. So thank you all so much for sharing that perspective and those success stories and lessons learned. I wanted to thank the audience as well. Thanks for tuning in today and joining us for this discussion. You're going to get an email from me in about an hour with some follow-up information. You can be on the lookout for the webinar recording, certificate of attendance, some more stuff about where you can find the archive from today. And I just want to extend a big thanks to Ricardo, Brad, and Stephanie for serving on today's panel and providing their expertise. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.